The rain tapped against the glass of Adrian Cole's office like impatient fingers, but he barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the message glowing on his phone screen, a message that had shaken the foundation of everything he believed about himself. For years, Adrian had carried himself as a man untouchable, wealthy, powerful, unshaken by doubt or emotion. He had built an empire from the ground up, brick by brick, deal by deal, and with every success he convinced himself that life could be controlled if only he remained disciplined, logical, and guarded. Love, family, children, those belonged to other people, people willing to risk disappointment. He wasn't one of them, at least that's what he had always told himself. But now, years after turning his back on the woman who had once been the only light in his carefully ordered world, the truth stared him in the face. He remembered the moment she stood before him, her voice trembling as she tried to explain, her eyes filled with a hope he crushed with words colder than winter steel. He had dismissed her, convinced himself she wanted something from him that could never exist. He had walked away without looking back, proud of his resolve, certain he was protecting them both from a lie. Yet the past has a way of circling back, and fate has a way of proving us wrong at the very moment we least expect it. Adrian had seen the little girl in the crowded plaza just hours before. The tilt of her head, the curve of her smile, the unmistakable spark in her eyes that mirrored his own reflection. He didn't need a test or a document to confirm what his heart had tried so long to deny. For the first time in years, his chest tightened, not with victory or loss in business, but with the unbearable weight of regret. Somewhere, out there, was the child he had once refused to believe in. And she carried every truth he had buried deep inside. Adrian Cole's mornings were rehearsed down to the minute, as though every sunrise owed him precision. He woke at 5, his apartment silent except for the hum of the city far below. Black coffee in one hand, financial reports in the other, he consumed numbers the way others consumed breakfast. His penthouse was a museum of success, steel, glass, and carefully chosen art that spoke nothing of him, only of wealth. To his staff and associates, Adrian was a man without weakness, someone who carried ambition like armor. He had grown up with little, and every deal, every towering building stamped with his company's name was proof that he had conquered the world that once ignored him. But beneath the polished suits and controlled expressions lay a secret he never spoke aloud. Years ago, a doctor's words had carved themselves into his memory with surgical precision. Fatherhood would never be possible. At first, he had worn the news like a wound, raw and unbearable. Eventually, he reshaped it into a shield. If he couldn't have children, then he didn't need them. If he couldn't build a family, he would build an empire instead. That became his truth, repeated until it felt like stone. Then came Elena. She entered his life like color bursting through gray skies, refusing to be bent by his rules. Where Adrian planned every step, she laughed in the moment. Where he spoke of profits, she spoke of dreams. He had told himself he kept her near because she was different, because she challenged him, but deep down he knew the truth. He was drawn to her light. And yet, when she stood before him with trembling words about the life growing inside her, Adrian had crushed that light without hesitation. His certainty, his pride, his fear all converged in a single cruel moment. He had told her it was impossible, that she was mistaken, that she had no place in the future he had so carefully designed. What he didn't know then was that the future has no regard for carefully laid plans. Years later, he would realize that the very thing he rejected was the only thing that could have completed him. Elena had left with nothing but a suitcase, a heart full of cracks, and the quiet promise that she would never beg a man to believe in his own child. The night she walked away, the city lights blurred through her tears, as if the world itself wept with her. She had loved Adrian with a sincerity that frightened her at times, believing that behind his fortress of discipline there was a man capable of tenderness. But his refusal cut deeper than any blade, his cold dismissal, his certainty that she carried nothing but a lie. With every step away from his empire, Elena told herself she was not walking into despair, but into resilience. She would raise her child with or without him. Those first years tested her strength in ways she could never have imagined. The apartment she rented was small, its walls thin enough for her daughter to hear laughter from neighbors on nights when Elena was too exhausted to pretend joy of her own. She worked 2 jobs, days in a bookstore where the scent of paper kept her dreams alive, nights cleaning offices where people like Adrian signed contracts that shaped skylines. She tucked away her pain, folding it into bedtime stories, kissing her daughter's forehead as though love could erase hunger, fatigue, and fear. And yet, there were moments of light. Her daughter, Lily, had eyes that carried both fire and innocence, a reflection of the man Elena wished Adrian had allowed himself to be. Lily's laughter filled rooms no matter how small, her questions about the world forcing Elena to believe in wonder again. Every time Lily reached for her hand, Elena felt the strength to keep moving forward. She learned that heartbreak could coexist with hope, that even when love had failed her, it had given her the greatest gift she would ever know. What Adrian had denied became the reason Elena never surrendered. She did not need his empire. She was building her own, one made of bedtime kisses, scraped knees healed with whispers, and the quiet courage to never let her daughter see her broken. Lily grew like sunlight slipping through closed curtains, unstoppable, finding ways to shine even in the smallest of spaces. From the very beginning, she carried a spirit that seemed larger than her years, a curiosity that turned every walk to school into an adventure and every question into a challenge Elena struggled to answer. She wanted to know why stars twinkled, why people hurried past one another without smiling, why her mother sometimes sat in silence staring at old photographs she thought Lily couldn't see. Her innocence was fierce, her laughter contagious, and yet hidden in the tilt of her head and the spark in her eyes was a resemblance Elena could never escape. Every day, Lily looked a little more like Adrian, though the little girl had no idea who her father was. Teachers marveled at her brilliance, neighbors adored her charm, and strangers often paused, captivated by the boldness of her smile. But there were nights when Lily's voice softened, when she asked why other children spoke about their fathers, and why hers never came to school plays or birthdays. Elena's heart tightened each time, searching for answers that would protect her daughter from the truth yet still honor her longing. She spoke of heroes found in books, of strength that lived inside every child, of love that was sometimes enough all on its own. Still, she knew questions would grow heavier as Lily grew older. What Elena didn't know was that destiny had already begun stitching its silent threads. One afternoon, in a crowded market square, Lily's laughter echoed as she chased after a balloon that slipped from her hand. The balloon floated high, weaving through the air, and Lily's small feet darted between the crowd. It was then, at the exact moment Adrian Cole stepped into the square, that the little girl's laughter reached him like a forgotten melody. He froze, his gaze locking onto a child with eyes he recognized as his own. He didn't know her name, but something inside him knew the truth he had buried for years had just found him. Adrian stood rooted to the spot, the sounds of the market fading until all he could hear was the echo of that laugh. It struck him like lightning, sharp, undeniable, searing through the armor he had built around his life. The little girl moved with a confidence that mirrored his own stride. Her smile curved in a way he had seen every morning in the mirror. For a moment, time bent, and he was no longer the man who conquered towers of glass and steel, but a stranger confronted by the very piece of his soul he had once refused to acknowledge. His chest tightened as though the truth had waited years just for this meeting, to strip him of every excuse and every wall he had ever built. When Elena appeared, chasing after Lily with the same urgency of a mother protecting her whole world, Adrian's breath caught. She hadn't seen him yet, her face flushed with the effort of keeping up with a child so full of life. But when her eyes finally lifted and met his, it was as if the earth shifted beneath them both. Gone was the woman who had once pleaded for his trust. In her place stood someone stronger, tempered by years of sacrifice. There was no welcome in her gaze, no softness. Only distance, only caution. Adrian wanted to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. He remembered the night he turned her away, the disbelief, the cutting dismissal that drove her from his life. Now here was proof running through the plaza, laughing, alive, carrying his features as naturally as breathing. A storm of regret and longing rose inside him, and for the first time in years, Adrian felt powerless. He, the man who once controlled everything, could not command the love of the daughter he had denied, nor the forgiveness of the woman he had broken. And yet he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He could not walk away again.